Good evening, and thank you for tuning in to the Star of Zion. Tonight, we present to you a new series entitled Freedom in Crisis. In this series, we will be highlighting issues and narratives from around the world where we find the freedom of individuals, groups in crisis. We're so glad tonight to have with us our new social justice editor, the Reverend Dr. Allison Lee. She's an educator, preacher in her own right, a member of the Trinity A.M.E Zion Church in Greensboro, North Carolina. We thank you all for tuning in, and on behalf of our Chief Communications Officer and Editor-in-Chief, Mr. Darren Kent, this is Freedom in Crisis. Thank you.
Amazing grace.
They had big dreams and big hearts, the sweet faces of the children gone too soon. 8-year-old Uzia Garcia was just learning to play football. He enjoyed passing the pigskin with his doting grandfather. Xavier Javier Lopez was 10. He loved to dance. He also enjoyed skateboarding, and his favorite subject in school was art. Anne-Marie Jo Garza had just made the honor roll. She made her father very proud. Eliana Cruz Torres enjoyed baseball. Here she is ready to hit a home run. Tess Marie Mata was also 10. She really liked milkshakes. Here she is dancing up a storm to Bruno Mars. Lexi Rubio was described as a bright light to everyone who knew her. Jose Flores was a big baseball fan. He loved school. Rod was 10 years old. She loved gymnastics class. Rigilio Torres called himself a difference maker at school. He was 10. Annabelle Guadalupe Rodriguez showed a lot of school spirit, recently celebrating Field Day. Her cousin, Jackie Cesares, also lost her life. She looks like an angel as she celebrated her first communion 2 weeks ago. Alethea Ramirez held a chocolate chip cupcake to celebrate turning 10. 11-year-old Miranda Manthis had a smile that would light up the room. There are others, all 10 years old. Matt Rodriguez was described as a sweet, smart little girl. Nevea Bravo's cousin says she's flying with the angels now.
My dad.
Ellie Garcia made this video for her dad, who was working and couldn't attend her birthday party.
I love you, Dad.
Yala Nicole Seguero posted this game day photo, ready to watch a basketball game at school. Her cousin, Yese Carmelo Levanos, was also killed. Layla Salazar proudly holds her first place field day ribbons. So many broken hearts, little ones who had so much to live for.
Shall we remember the hands of those we lost? Picking up boxes of grits, holding cans of soda, smiling as they imagine the joy that will be revealed on the faces of grandchildren waiting for Nana's magical meal. What happens to the joy that was waiting to spring from the edges of the heart when death steals her entrance on the stage? Shall we remember names? Or shall we tell their story? Grandmother, picking up shrimp to cook for children. Warrior woman who fought for children locked in poverty and wrote op-eds in the local newspaper. Father, picking up a birthday cake for his son. Big sister excited to prepare a meal for her little brother. Pantry founder who lived her life based on Matthew 25, picking up food to nourish the homeless in the community. An armor bearer who was called to lighten the burden of a pastor and be the free Uber driver of all seniors who had no transportation to the store. A caretaker of a husband with dementia. These are the ones we lost, who are now ancestors because of the poison America produces. Lord, bless their memory and forgive us for not praying with action, worshiping with work, and adding service to our shout. But never let us forget the stories nor the names. Amen.
Good evening, beautiful people. I hope this broadcast finds you safe this evening, reminded that you're loved and with a desire to be bonded together in solidarity. Thank you for joining us on this evening as Star of Zion presents its first in a series called Freedom in Crisis. This evening, we are here to talk about the tragic yet intentional massacres of those that should not have been subject to what they have been over the last couple of weeks, both in Buffalo and in Texas. We're here to talk about what's taken place, what has not taken place, and what we can all do both collectively and individually to take action. Before we bring on our dynamic panelists on this evening, we have to acknowledge that in the Buffalo shooting, we lost one of our own members in the A.M.E. Zion Church, Mrs. Ruth Whitfield. We cannot have this broadcast. We cannot talk about anything on this evening without first bringing tribute and just speaking on her name. She was a member of Durham Memorial A.M.E. Zion Church, where Reverend Kevin Coakley is the pastor. So at this time, we're going to play a video that you may have seen, but it's going to share a little bit about the wonderful woman in the personhood of Mrs. Ruth Whitfield.
Once again, community members and loved ones gathered for a funeral. 2 weeks ago today, 10 people were killed in a mass shooting at Tops on Jefferson Avenue in the city. Good evening, everyone. I'm Claudine Ewing. Today marked the last funeral for the victims. This time it was to say goodbye to 86-year-old Ruth Whitfield. 2 News Side's Daniel Church was at today's service.
Ruth has 4 kids, 9 grandkids, and 10 great-grandchildren. She also leaves behind a husband who she was visiting at a local nursing home right before she went to Tops on May 14th.
To know the meaning of a family woman was to know 86-year-old Ruth Whitfield. Even those who weren't in her family tree.
She became like a big sister for me.
Considered Ruth from the same blood.
But her legacy would be one of love.
To know love was to also know Ruth Whitfield. It's no wonder that love was given back to her at her funeral. Every aisle filled, Ruth's life was one to celebrate.
Now sing it like you really mean it, church. This is my story.
Ruth's story began in 1936 when she was born in Jackson, Mississippi, but later raised on Grand Island. In 1954, she found the love of her life in Garnell Whitfield Sr. When Ruth wasn't cooking up one hell of a mac and cheese.
Oh, that macaroni and cheese, oh, yeah.
She was probably at the thrift store. And though she didn't graduate high school, she made sure to finally get her GED, a lifelong dream finally achieved. Ruth was the kind of woman you'd feel lucky to know, and to her kids, a mother devastating to lose.
We're not going quietly into the night. My mother deserved more than that. She didn't deserve to die like that. She didn't deserve it.
That hole in their heart would never be filled.
Now her family and an entire community must pick up the pieces.
I'm standing here at a funeral for my friend's grandma. Because this man decided that we weren't good enough.
Every day, but especially today, they must wonder when someone will finally create change that is good enough.
It's so sad. It's just so sad.
So another one of their angels on earth doesn't have to become an angel in heaven.
My soul has been anchored in the Lord.
Ruth's service was held at Mount Olive Baptist Church in the Greater Delavan neighborhood. Among those at her funeral were a plethora of government officials, including Vice President Kamala Harris. Danielle Church, Channel 2 News.
Buffalo, we are strong, but we're broken.
A message of hope following a deadly racist mass shooting in Buffalo, New York. Today, I had the chance to talk with Reverend Kevin Coakley from Durham Memorial A.M.E. Zion Church in Buffalo. He's the pastor at the church where Ruth Whitfield, the oldest victim killed in the massacre, was a member. Pastor Coakley grew up right here in the Low Country in Mount Pleasant. He says the Emanuel 9 tragedy has been his guiding light on how to bring the community together.
And we have to stand on that new command that God has given us, that we love one another, even the unlovable. And so Charleston, Mount Pleasant has taught that, and they have lived it. And so it's a part of my DNA.
Still ahead at 5:30, we hear from President Biden about his plans to tackle the recent rise in gun violence across the nation.
Our thoughts and prayers are with the family of Ruth Whitfield, with the church family. But we also have to say on this evening that we are here to talk about action and policy and change as well. We can couple the two, I do believe. I'm going to go ahead and bring on our panelists this evening, one at a time. We have with us sharing on tonight, first Senator Natalie Murdock. She is from and out of the North Carolina General Assembly. She's going to be joining us on tonight. After that, we have Representative Sam McKenzie. He is coming to us from the Tennessee General Assembly. And last but certainly not least, we have Reverend Dr. Franklin Richardson. And he is the chairman of the board of the National Action Network. We're going to go ahead and hop right in on this evening. Thank you all for joining us. We are so glad to have each of you. We know it's a holiday weekend, but you took the time out to come and join us and talk about a very important topic on tonight. We're going to jump right in. I want us to start off. I can't say it's an easy question, but one that hopefully you'll have an answer for. What is an adjective, or maybe just any word that you can use to describe your feelings about the tragedies that have taken place over the last few weeks? And why are you choosing that word? Let us know what's on your heart, what's on your mind, and why. We'll start out with you, Representative McKenzie.
Well, thank you, and again, thank you for just putting this forum on, just so that we can dialogue and just try to grow and glean things from each other. You know, as I thought about that, I think the word that I would use is preventable. We always hear the same things ex post facto. We hear there were signs. We hear that at the end of the day, this person should not have been a gun owner, been able to purchase a weapon. So it's preventable. We understand human nature, and we understand the human frailties and the fact that not all people, just by the fact that they're born, should be able to possess and use a weaponry like this. And so that would be my one word. This could have been prevented if we took sensible laws, if we recognize these indicators that are out there. So that's my word.
That's powerful. Thank you so much, Representative McKenzie. Preventable. Absolutely. Senator Murdock, if you would share with us your word and why.
Yes, and thank you again to the A.M.E. Zion Church for hosting this event. As we all know, we are the Freedom Church, and so I do think that we should lead with having these sorts of conversations. And as a legislator in the South, the word that I'll use is disgusted. I'm really just disgusted at our inability to do anything. How many times have we had these conversations? How many times have we had these forums where we hold our vigils? We have a lot of conversations. We have protests. We have students that are now having die-ins, but we don't do anything. And I'm an eternal optimist and will remain hopeful. But when you see this level of violence with an extremist that just obviously hated Black people in Buffalo, to these babies that were massacred in Texas, no matter who those individuals are that are on the other end of that assault weapon, we've got to do something about it. I just don't know how The folks that I serve with can, post their messages, on social media, give a floor speech, and then go back to business as usual. It is very political. I'll get into that later, but that is why I say disgusted, because we should be here to protect people. How many more people have to die before we take this seriously?
Mm-hmm. I think disgusted is a really strong word, and one that a lot of people can relate to, because how could you see this and not be disgusted? How could you watch the news images? How could you know that something as awful as this is taking place? How could you know that it was preventable and be anything other than disgusted? So thank you for sharing that. Dr. Richardson, if you could share with us your word and tell us why. You're muted, Dr. Richardson. You just hit unmute for us.
Let me thank A.M.E. Zion Church for calling us to this. All of our churches have got to stand up and be counted. And I appreciate your legacy of freedom, but also your resolve to be engaged in this hour. I think my word, what I see this, I'm driven. I'm driven to participate in change, to take this on. I'm resolved to take this on, to engage others, and I think all of us need to be driven, not just passively sitting by and watching it and say, oh, it's so terrible. No, it's terrible, but it calls us to participate in correcting it. And we got to come up with answers and solutions. So my word is I feel driven. I've seen too much of this. I've been through this too much. It keeps coming back, but we must be driven to change it and resolve it.
Thank you, Dr. Richardson. I feel that sense of urgency and that passion that you have, that this is awful, but we are going to have to do something about this. We can no longer stand by. It can't be business as usual. We can't sit on the sidelines. It is our job to act. And that is what we are here to discuss on this evening. So I thank you all for sharing. I have a question that I want to ask to all three of you, but a quick video clip is going to play for us. If you could just watch that briefly, and then I will ask the question right after.
I'm not going to talk about basketball. Nothing's happened with our team in the last 6 hours. We're going to start the same way tonight. Any basketball questions don't matter. Since we left shoot around, 14 children were killed 400 miles from here, and a teacher. And in the last 10 days, we've had elderly black people killed in a supermarket in Buffalo. We've had Asian churchgoers killed in Southern California, and now we have children murdered at school. When are we going to do something? I'm tired. I'm so tired of getting up here and offering condolences to the devastated families that are out there. I'm so tired of I'm tired of the moments of silence. Enough. There's 50 senators right now who refuse to vote on H.R. 8, which is a background check rule that the House passed a couple of years ago. It's been sitting there for 2 years. And there's a reason they won't vote on it, to hold on to power. So I ask you, Mitch McConnell, I ask all of you senators who refuse to do anything about the violence and school shootings and supermarket shootings, I ask you, are you going to put your own desire for power ahead of the lives of our children and our elderly and our churchgoers? Because that's what it looks like.
Let me say a couple things here right out of the gate. Number one, something is wrong with the United States of America when an 18-year-old kid on his birthday goes out there and buys 2 assault weapons, rifles. In May, this kid, 18 years old, can't have a drink in Texas. Would you allow your kid, if he came home at 18, hey, Mom, look what I got for my birthday, I bought 2 assault rifles? You go crazy. He didn't have that parental supervision. Nobody checked. Nobody did anything. So Kerr's 1,000% right. Secondly, all the folks who make a big deal, this is about mental illness. Well, how come this doesn't happen in Britain? I was in Ireland. There's no mental illness in Ireland? France, Spain, Germany, Italy. You don't see this happening in those countries because the gun availability is not there. You are not a 15-year-old kid at a boarding school in Britain who can walk into a gun shop and buy 330 magazines and 5 assault weapons. You can in the United States. And although Biden, the president, he says what he wants, do something. Obama did after Sandy Hook. He did everything he could. Nobody followed suit. And although I try to play it right down the middle, I vote both Republican and Democrat. I vote for the best man all the time. In the history of since 1980, vote for the best man. Bottom line is, in this particular situation, Kerr's right. It's about the Republicans in that Senate who are wrapped up with the NRA and all the gun lobbyists and everything else who are afraid. There's 310 million guns in America for 300 million people who are afraid that if they get tough here, that somehow they're going to get knocked out of office because their states love guns. Love guns. Do you think everybody brings up the Second Amendment? What do you think George Washington, Sam Adams, Jefferson, Ben Franklin, what do you think they're thinking about right now? You think they thought this? There was no police. There was no state militia back in 1780 when they did the state Second Amendment. It's not the same thing. This is totally different today. I mean, it's ridiculous. You're going to bring up the Second Amendment, well, I have my right to have guns, and you're going to bring up something that was passed in 1780 and say that applies to today? That is absolutely absurd. And the other thing, Abbott, the governor, and again, I play it right down the middle. Cruz, that senator. And how about the representative of that community there in West San Antonio and West Texas? They all voted no on gun control deals in March. They voted no on it. And then Adam yesterday gives me this big deal about how we're heartbroken. Well, you had a chance to do something about it. You did nothing. And where are they going on Friday, half of them? To an NAR convention in Houston, Texas, for crying out loud. Houston, Texas. It's absolutely absurd. America, shape up, wake up, and do something. I don't care what it is. And yes, there are a million reasons why we have all these 18-year-old kids who feel disconnected and feel like they got to go out there and blow up a supermarket, a school, a movie theater in Colorado with armor on. They're disconnected. But I can't look at every computer. I can't look at every social media post. I can't look at every Instagram thing to see what these kids are thinking about. But what I can do, I can limit their ability to obtain weapons. That I can do. And I understand that gun companies in this country don't want that because they make a ton of money when they sell these assault weapons. So that company that stored Dick's Sporting Goods, wherever it was in Texas, when they sold those 2 assault weapons to this kid a couple of weeks ago, you think they care? No, they don't. They don't care. They say they care, but they don't because they do nothing about it. And listen, I lived 20 minutes from Sandy Hook. I was there 5 days later. That is an absolute disgrace that in 9 years we have done nothing. Kurt's right. I got issues with Kurt with other issues. His China thing and everything, I could go on and on. But here he's 100% right. This does not happen in Europe, Japan, China. It does not have Israel. Name the country. It happens here. The United States of America. Because you politicians, in this case, most of them Republicans, and the president, go out there and do something. Let's go. It can't be that hard.
We have preventable, we have discussed it, we have driven, and you hear this dialogue and can't help but to hear frustration and anger. I mean, it's a mood, right? It makes me want to jump up out of my seat right now. And I'm like, okay, what can we do tonight? How can we go to sleep for another night? And this is not settled. In December of this year, I believe it is, we'll be hitting the 10-year anniversary of what happened at Sandy Hook Elementary in Connecticut. And our then at the time, and I will say forever, POTUS Barack Obama, he stated this: we're going to have to come together and take meaningful action to prevent more tragedies like this, regardless of the politics. I want you all to share with us, if you can, any legislation that's been attempted since that point in time, if you can share. You spoke to this a little bit, Senator Murdoch, but you didn't go quite into detail yet. Is it the politics that has solely kept us from succeeding in coming together, as President Obama stated? What is hindering us as a nation, states, and individually from taking meaningful action? And I won't direct that anywhere. And let me calm down, because that video's got me like here. That is really where I am. But if you all could share what's hindering us, what legislation has taken place at this point in time.
Yes, I'm happy to jump in. For folks obviously that are watching this federally, I do want to mention for mass shootings, there was a time where we did have an assault weapons ban. It expired. We weren't able to reintroduce that, unfortunately, and we did see a decrease in these extreme mass shootings. And more than anything, we've really got to get a handle on the assault weapons. I am a legislator in a southern state. So I do have to give a little background I represent an urban area, Durham, but my father, my mom is from a rural area, Caswell County, as well as Alamance. So she grew up with her father, having that long rifle for hunting to protect his home. And somewhere along the line, we lost the point of what I believe that constitutional right was. It was to defend yourself, as was beautifully articulated in that previous video. You don't have a constitutional right to an AR-15. I don't know where in the world that became the norm. Just because you want to protect yourself and your home, it doesn't mean that you need these assault weapons. And so that is where we've just lost our way. When it comes to weapons that you can just kill so many people at a time, that is what the issue is. And unfortunately, as we saw, even law enforcement, they were fearful of entering, for a number of reasons, but it was because of the type of weapon, and it made it even difficult for them to enter the building. So I think a number of laws are on the books. But definitely the assault weapons ban has got to be a big one. And when we say common sense gun laws, it doesn't mean we're going to take away, people's rights to defend themselves. And I think that that's where the discussion gets lost. I'm a proud liberal, but I think that we have to agree that that is a fundamental right that no one is arguing with. But even gun owners will tell you, definitely not 18-year-olds have a right to have an AR-15. Though that is a type of weapon that is for someone who is trained in the military. Average people have no need to have that sort of weapon. And we will continue, unfortunately, to see these sorts of tragedies when those weapons get in the hands of bad people. Bad things happen. And they don't just have to be mental. As we saw, this person probably, with the Texas example, would have passed a psychological exam. It could just be an individual that wants to do harm, which is why you shouldn't even take that chance. They just should not be in the hands of folks. But from New Zealand to the UK, when they had mass shootings, they did something about it. The ban is a very, very smart move. Universal background checks is a big one. There are a lot of loopholes. You can go to these gun shows and pretty much buy whatever you want. We also have an issue with tracing guns. So we really, really need to get a handle on these manufacturers. I think that this is also an opportunity to go directly to them, to the manufacturers, to say, you are producing these weapons. We have to hold you accountable as well. But background checks, and assault weapons ban, those are very, very easy places to start.
Thank you for sharing, Senator. Either Representative McKenzie or Dr. Richardson, if you would like to jump in, please feel free. And I just want to pause before you do. If you have questions, this is to our virtual audience. I know there are people watching. We are monitoring the chat. If there's anything you want to ask our panelists on this evening, feel free to drop it down in the comments below.
Thank you. I'll go next. And Senator Murdoch put it beautifully, so I don't want to rehash everything she said. But I want to tell a story about a bill that I presented this past session. And it wasn't a gun bill. It was not a gun bill. It's a bill brought to me by the African-American clergy in the state of Tennessee, across the state of Tennessee. They said, look, we need to get a handle on what gun violence is doing to the African-American community. So this was a simple bill that asked the health department to track what's going on with this shooting. There was a shooting in Knoxville or Chattanooga or Nashville or Memphis or wherever. What happened to that family unit? Have an epidemiologist come and take a look at it from a scientific standpoint. And so, and what we wanted to see, are the children doing okay 5 years later? What's going on with the wife that whose husband was violently shot down, or vice versa? What happened to that? What I call a simple bill that had nothing to do with gun ownership or anything. The gun lobbyists took it over, and they started, because if anything threatens their empire, they start. So these representatives, in this case, it passed a subcommittee. I'm turning flips, but then that's when it happens, and that's what happens here. Once this emotion subsides, the gun lobbyists will come right back to us, elected officials, and start putting the pressure on them, not on me, but on them, on the majority, to never ever pass anything that remotely resembles any kind of gun control or things of that nature. So we have to, once the tears dry up and once the emotions subside, we have to be strategic and consistent about saying no. As President Obama said, there has to change. After Sandy Hook, I thought the nation heard. And after Buffalo and now here in Texas, the nation hears us. It's what we do from this point going on. And so that's what I would say, in addition to everything that the senator spoke of.
Thank you.
Well, my colleagues have done a great job in defining the need to focus on weapon possession. I think it's critical, and I think we've got to really push it. I mean, we've really got to be relentless and not let this go away. We all need to take responsibility that we didn't follow through on Sandy Hook like we should have. We all got to own that. Black people didn't do it. We had a president who was calling for it, but we gave it up. And we just got to keep ourselves focused on the pain that we felt in Buffalo and the pain we felt in Uvalde, Texas. We got to keep that ahead. But beyond that, I want us to consider the fact that America has created a glorified culture of violence. And we have made violence attractive. We put it in the videos, we put it in movies, we make a shrine out of people who act out violence and kill on television, and heroes, movie stars out of people whose whole image is violence. And we don't think that that's going to shape the values of our young people, or consider those activities as options to respond to things they don't agree with. We are modeling behavior where it comes to violence as a culture. Every time we buy a ticket to a violent movie, we are enforcing and we are affirming violence as a powerful presence in our culture. And I think we got to get the guns. But we got to go deeper in terms of what are our values? What are American values? The gun represents an articulation of the values, but there are values that drive people to take guns and solve their problems, and they are enshrined in American United States culture. We got to go back and examine that, and we've got to start speaking about it. We got to stop shrining violence and lifting up violence as something wonderful, and video games and everything is just violence. If you ever really sit and look at it, we've gone crazy with killing people for entertainment. We hack heads, we show blood, we've gone crazy. And then we wonder why children and teenagers decide when they get into a crisis moment why they turn to guns. We taught them, we showed them, we illustrated it for them. I just think that that's part of the way we've got to address this problem.
Thank you. I hear us saying that we need to focus on our values, but also we need to keep our foot on the gas, essentially, and we have to be consistent. We have to be persistent. I want to lift up a comment that is put in the chat by Dr. Parrish. And she says, Black America can ensure policy change. How? Black people go out and buy guns en masse. I can assure you a policy will be implemented solely based upon the notion to limit African Americans. And I think that is something that we have to acknowledge. I see what you're saying here, Dr. Parrish, and I do not disagree at all. But I wanted to lift that comment up on this evening. One of our panelists mentioned, they all mentioned about action, making sure our actions are taking place. I do have a question. We're going to play this quick clip, and then I'll hit into our question that's going to talk about thoughts and prayers versus action and policy.
I'm sorry, I'm embarrassed. I can't pull it together.
Tears from CNN anchor Kate Baldwin over the school shooting.
Please don't take a second for granted. Hug your family. Tell them you love them.
Across the airways, there is shock.
My rage I've been encouraged not to express it today because I understand that people have been overwhelmed by the news this morning. And before you tell me to stay in my lane, this is my lane. This is my lane.
Gail King says she's at her wit's end.
It's very difficult to report the details of this Texas school shooting without feeling the outrage and frustration and the deep, deep sadness. We cover these stories again, again, and again, and again, and you all know how it goes.
Stephen Colbert recorded his show right after the news broke.
Shortly before I came out here tonight, we learned of the unspeakable shooting in Uvalde, Texas today. And while we can add our prayers for the dead, there is nothing that can ever be said that can approach the immeasurable grief of those families. But while we're at it, let's pray this time our leaders show a modicum of courage in trying to prevent this from ever happening again.
Golden State Warriors head coach Steve Kerr expressed his fury.
When are we going to do something? I'm tired. I'm so tired of getting up here and offering condolences.
A moment of silence followed at the sports arena in Texas.
Our thoughts and prayers are also with the victims of the horrific shooting today at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. We mourn with their families and friends and the entire community.
Here at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, there is shock and an increased police presence today as this town still grapples with being home to America's deadliest school shooting, when 10 years ago, a gunman shot and killed 20 students and 6 staff members. I spoke with Mark Barden, whose son Daniel was killed at Sandy Hook Elementary. The emotions, did all of the horror come back to you?
Oh, yeah. My 7-year-old son Daniel's shooting murder in his first grade classroom is something that will just be with me every minute.
This is America. We were supposed to be able to do things and be the people we wanted to be, and now we are in a crazy place.
All over social media, there are posts and there are pictures of people saying, we've had enough. Thoughts and prayers. I mean, we're seeing the words thoughts and prayers with a line crossed out beneath it because somehow we've gotten to a place where in the church especially, we're using thoughts and prayers as a replacement for action and change. And so we're seeing people that are in the church, people that are outside of the church, everywhere, enough thoughts and prayers. We're saying, where have thoughts and prayers gotten us? Where has it taken us? But because now we need adequate public policy. Now we need for action to take place. I want to pose this question to you first, Dr. Richardson. How does our faith inform our action? I watched a very moving video from you yesterday as you were speaking for the National Action Network, and you talked about how we sing the Lord's song in a strange land. You talked about where our hope is. I really want to hear about, from your perspective, how does our faith inform our action? Does our faith inform our action? I feel like it should, right? We have so many individuals who believe that social justice, right, is not a part of the Bible, right? It's been watered down. I want you to speak about that. What is our role? How does our faith inform our action right now? How should our faith be informing our action?
Well, I think it's very important that we who are Christians and are Black make sure that we understand that there is a perspective of the scripture that has informed our journey, and we must not have it watered down. You know, one of the things we face in the Black church is we have a white theology in the Black church, a theology that is surrounding, denying us of who we are, and manipulating the Jesus of liberation for the Jesus of right-wing patriotism. I don't even know that Jesus. And so for us, first of all, is to have a full sounded, grounded, biblical understanding of the text, understanding how the text applies to our sociology. And then that will inform the kind of prayers we make. And the kind of prayers we make will determine the kind of actions we take. Prayer helps us to set the stage for our actions. But if we have an anemic theology, an anemic understanding of what God is calling for, we will have anemic action. It's clear to me that what has happened in Uvalde and happened in Buffalo is an indication of something going very wrong in American culture. For me, it has spiritual implications. We have a corrupted spirituality that's tolerated so much. I mean, it goes back to the origins of this nation. How do you have a religion, a Christology that tolerates slavery, affirming the masters of the plantation in the name of God, praying on Sunday and enslaving people on Monday? We gotta call out that dichotomy of religion, and because too often is religion used as a tool to manipulate conduct. And so for me, prayer informs my faith, and my faith empowers my action.
Thank you so much for sharing. I hear you. That prayer should call us to action. If you would like to share, Representative McKenzie or Senator Murdoch, please feel free. Anything about what are the steps that our faith should cause us to move into?
I mean, what I would say is amen to that. You know, James tells us prayer without works is dead, and I think we don't need to stop praying. Prayer works. Prayer is powerful. Mm-hmm. That pipeline to God, but we have to understand after that, when we get up off of our knees, that's when the work begins, and the work has to be multifaceted, multi-pronged. I mean, the commenter that spoke to us gathering weapons, you know, that's a strategy there. But what I'll say, and it's heart-wrenching. It's tough when you're in a chamber there with 98 of your colleagues. There's 99 of us in all, and you hear people come after this horrendous vote, like one where we don't have to have a permit in the state of Tennessee to carry a weapon. We don't have to have a license or anything. I really hated to vote for that, Representative. I think that's a bad piece of legislation. But they're intimidated in voting. We got to call them out. We have to say the time is now for this to stop. We have to have some kind of, from a policy standpoint, America, like the commenters were saying, these type things don't happen in other countries. I work at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and there's a facility down the street from us that deals with nuclear weapons. So is it my right to have a nuclear weapon because of a piece of because of a right that was given in the 1700s? No, that makes no sense. That's asinine to them. But an assault rifle is okay. Why? Why do you need a magazine that can hold this many rounds? What do you need to do with that weapon? So we just have to start calling it what it is. We have to start putting it to work and say, no, gun ownership is one thing, but having these weapons of horrendous destruction is something different. And we got to stop this here in America. It's time.
Yeah, and I think it's also a time where, back to why I'm really glad the A.M.E. Zion Church is having this conversation, where the church really does have to step up. Some years ago, for Lay Sunday, I did a speech around the church is political. It is inherently political. If you look at all the times during the civil rights movement, Dr. King, it was led by Black churches, and churches were political spaces because, as we know, we couldn't gather everywhere. So you had to gather in churches. That's where you felt safe. That's where you knew you could have these direct conversations. And the issue of violence and guns was brought to the church decades ago. I mean, the bombing in Birmingham. We've had young children to be killed and used as political puns for years. Then, the mass shooting in South Carolina. At church, you can't even worship in peace. You cannot even have Bible study in peace. So we can't simply ignore this when they brought it to the front steps of our churches, unfortunately, no matter what the faith is. So going back to the civil rights movement, what I'm hopeful of in this political time is we really have a interfaith movement that also involves a number of different organizations. The protest that they had right across from the NRA National Convention, you saw Black Lives Matter, you saw Moms Demand Action, you saw faith-based leaders. It wasn't simply, and I'm sure, you know, a national Action Network was there as well. It wasn't just one group, one organization. And so that's what I'm dedicated to doing in North Carolina, to show it's an issue for all of us. And thank you, Representative McKenzie. Someone made a comment of laws popping up in states saying you don't even need a permit. If you think that that's not going to have a direct impact on the Black community, when we are already losing far too many young men and women to gun violence, and now we're saying you don't even need a permit, just go for it, and you wonder why we're having some of the bloodiest months that we've seen on record. So we have to step up when it comes to advocating for common sense gun policy.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to jump around a little bit because I heard you, I heard one of our panelists mention the schools, educators. And so this question is twofold, and maybe I'll start at the top. What is the responsibility of police pertaining to gun violence? Are they being held accountable? We're looking at this shooting most recently at a school, right? And there are all types of news reports popping out all over the place that police first weren't there, and then they were there, but they couldn't get in the school. Then they were there in the school. They waited outside for a certain amount of time. They couldn't get in. Can you share with us, and I pose this to all, because really what this is boiling down to is, what are we doing to support our educators? What are we doing to support our students and our school systems regarding a safe learning environment for our schools? And it's not lost on me that this community here was a Hispanic community primarily. And so just when I'm thinking about the demographics of the individuals involved, especially, we have students lose lives, teachers lose lives. What is the role of the police? Do we think that they're doing what they need to do? And then how can we support our schools? How can we support our teachers and our educators?
Well, I think, I definitely think that we probably are going over a little overload on the police in this crisis. I'm not part of that choir. I'm not part of that. I think putting the blame on the police in a shocking time like that, and they got their own relatives inside the school. They got their wives in the school. Some of them had their children in the school. I think they were in shock, just like everybody else. They're trying to navigate their ways through that. And we also they had training. So it wasn't that they weren't trained. It was required that they have certain kind of training for this. But in the real life circumstance, it's a different world than when you train in a classroom.
That's right.
So I think that's it. At the same time, we have to value educators. We don't value teachers. We don't value them. You tell what we value by who we pay. We pay basketball players and football players, baseball players. We don't pay teachers. We don't give teachers respect. And they're shaping the future of our nation and the future of our children. So we've got to stand up and put more value on our teachers and on education. But I don't see us turning our schools. We cannot surrender in turning our schools into prisons where teachers carry guns, and more guns is the solution to the problem that's killing us. I just can't join into that crowd. I don't see that as a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm horrified by suggestions that we simply need more security for the schools, and that's the answer to the problem. No, it's not. It wasn't an assault weapon, but I've just been seeing a lot of commercials this weekend, just reminding folks of all the deaths that occur from children getting a hold of guns. My line sister, unfortunately, had to fly home. Her 4-year-old niece found the gun in the home and shot herself. So the last thing we need is to say, let's bring more weapons in schools when children are young. They are curious. That is horrifying. Do not know what happened with the security breach there. I will mention I am concerned about a door being open. Don't know why that door was open. And I don't know why an active shooter was active for over an hour. Those two things do not make sense to me. But I do agree we need to focus on the gun issue, why an 18-year-old even had the gun, why did he have an AR-15? But just with our educators, they just hold so much. And children, 1999 was Columbine. We talk about Sandy Hook, but let's go back to 1999. So I was either a freshman or a sophomore in high school. So I was kind of the beginning of that generation where mass shootings in schools are the norm, and that's not acceptable. It is not okay for our children to go to school wondering, will they make it home? These parents, these teachers. If you watch some of the drills that the teachers have to deal with, they go through drills to secure their own classrooms. How will they take cover? They're teaching them how to provide medical care. They literally teach teachers how to rip off t-shirts and to try to minimize bleeding. And they are not military personnel, they are teachers. So just what our teachers are dealing with, our children, it is unreal. No other nation has to deal with this, but our schools cannot simply just be an open ground for some demented individual to come in and just do this to our babies.
Senator, I don't want the Black community to take solace in blaming the Senate all along. Our community, Black people, we are responsible for harboring illegal guns in our homes,
yes,
in our communities.
Yes.
And our kids get those guns and they kill each other. They get the guns because, and then there's this whole idea that somehow Black people need to arm up now because guns are somewhere. We arm up, that's certain suicide. Yep. We can't outgun the people who got the guns. we can't outgun the gunner. So, I mean, it's really Black people got to take on a responsibility. We got to fight for the legislation, but we also got to turn our guns in. And we got to stop perpetuating this violent culture among our community. Much of the killing, individual killing that goes on in our community goes on by illegal guns in our community.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right. And I know this is probably a little bit off topic, but 100 miles from me in Chattanooga on last night, they had 6 people shot. One I think is critical, and it's just people who should not have guns, who are illegal guns out there. So you're absolutely right. But to your point, I was on county commission when we passed the budget, and the public was excited about the fact that we were going to put an armed guard in every school within Knox County, like 80 some odd schools. To me, it was it's a horrible thing that we have to put armed security guards in our K through 2 schools. Our babies need protected, but they do. So what we have to do is get to the cause, as we were talking about initially. We're going to have to get these guns out of the people's hands that they should not be in. And there are flags. Everyone you hear, there are flags. As Pastor said, we got police our own. We know what a lot of these illegal guns are in our community. We need to go after them, and they need to go after them in the majority community as well.
Thank you all for sharing that perspective. And I did just want to lift up, I did see a comment down below that mentioned metal detectors essentially being in schools. And we've heard a lot about that in other preventative measures from Ruby Hill Benjamin.
Yeah.
I want to turn.
I'm sorry, really quickly.
Yes, ma'am.
There's another policy piece that I know the legislative member knows about. Let's talk about metal detectors. We also are fighting against ghost guns. Ghost guns allow you to use a 3D printer at your home and print a gun that is not detectable by a metal detector. So no matter what the technology is, it always comes down to the guns and the culture. I'm glad that has come up tonight, but ghost guns are horrifying. Our Attorney General here in North Carolina, as well as nationally in other states, ghost guns will be the new frontier as more people get their hands on these 3D printers.
Right.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a piece of information that we need to know. And that sounds horrifying. We are still going to talk about the matter, but I want to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to have a video that I want to play, and then we'll move forward with our next question.
Mass shooting After mass shooting across America, bringing outrage and calls for changes in gun laws. But sweeping gun reform in the U.S. has not been passed by legislators. The murder rate in the U.S. is higher than other countries. Just 2 years ago, in 2020, 79% of murders happened with guns in this country. In Canada, 37%. In Australia, gun deaths dropped to less than half that. And in the UK, only 4% of murders were because of guns. The difference, experts say, pointing to study after study, are gun laws.
Another modern horror. 34 men, women, and children massacred by gunshot.
Australia faced its worst ever mass shooting in 1996 when a man killed 35 people in Port Arthur. That prompted fast changes to gun laws in that country, including gun licensing and registration, a waiting period for purchases, banning semi and automatic weapons, and a gun buyback program that surrendered, by some estimates, about 1 million guns. Australia has seen only one mass shooting in the 26 years since. In Canada, the 1989 mass shooting of 14 women in Montreal led to the tightening of gun laws requiring shotgun and rifle licenses. But after pushback, that registry was abolished in 2012. More mass shootings followed. After the deadliest one in the country's history in 2020, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced an immediate ban on 1,500 types of military-grade guns, including the AR-15.
There is no use and no place for such weapons in Canada.
The UK also cracked down on guns after a pair of mass shootings in 1987 and another in 1996.
We're all going to stand by each other and do what we can to get each other through.
The country banning semi-automatic weapons the first time, then putting a ban on all handguns after the murders of 15 kids and a teacher at a primary school. The UK now has one of the lowest gun death rates in the world.
Thanks for watching our YouTube.
So we're covering this point again where in other countries, they are taking action, or their situation is currently really not our situation. Senator Murdoch, I want to start off with this question to you. There's heavy talk about red flag laws for our viewers. Red flag law is known as basically extreme risk protection. Essentially a state law. Law enforcement can seize guns from individuals who are considered a danger to themselves or to others. Right now, my understanding is that red flag laws are active in 19 states and in the capital, Washington, D.C., and that there has been some talk of this possibly becoming federal law. Share with us your thoughts on this. Is it feasible, and would it be effective common sense legislation, in your opinion, for law enforcement to be able to seize guns everywhere?
Absolutely. I do think that is one piece of the larger puzzle. We did every year, actually every session, we propose sweeping gun reform laws here in North Carolina that unfortunately haven't gone anywhere. But one of those are those red flag laws. And it was actually championed by one of my colleagues here in Durham County, Representative Marsha Morey, who was a judge. And so being that she was on that bench, she does know that there are times where you do know that someone is a threat to themselves. It could deal with someone that you think is suicidal, and you could request this and go to court and have a hearing, and they can make sure that they don't have guns. It's very useful in domestic violence situations. Just because you get that restraining order, it doesn't necessarily mean, depending on state law, that that individual isn't able to get a gun. But in issues such as this mass shooting, if you see other warning signs or know that something isn't right, you can reach out to law enforcement, or law enforcement can do that so that you can try to prevent people from being killed. So definitely not the only tool in the toolbox, but definitely for law enforcement and our judges, it would be a useful tool to have. And I hope that we can seriously consider that. You know, these are officers of the court that will make these decisions. And so I think if we did empower them to say, you know, I'm seeing posts online that are very concerning to me, or this person went out and bought 3 AR-15s in a day, or whatever the issue may be, if they can go to the court to say, I think that something's going on. I don't think this individual should have a gun. And I think it also causes you to think about, when you purchase one and you are a threat, what are you supposed to do? You know, so why can't we have laws on the books to say this person already owns these weapons, but we have enough evidence to show that they probably shouldn't have them. Let's do something about it. And back to a point that Dr. Richardson was making earlier, two things as far as the African American community, definitely need to do a better job, and just our culture with guns and why do we have so many. A lot of those guns, what I'm learning, here in the Durham community, you don't know who's purchasing them. You may be an individual that doesn't have the ability to get that permit, but you have cash and you can pay someone else to get that. And a lot of times it's women in the community that say, sure, I will take a quick $1,000 and process this paperwork and get the gun to you. The other thing with policies that I do want to be clear about, love the comment earlier of if, more and more African Americans started purchasing guns, something would happen. The rise of, the Black Panther movement, when they were out there, displaying their guns out in the open, laws were changed. And so I do want to be clear on whatever the laws are, we still have to be mindful that they are having a disproportionate impact on communities of color. Oftentimes, if we are pulled over, we saw with the incident with Philando Castile, he was a legal owner of that gun, ended up not leaving the scene alive. So sometimes it does provide the opportunity, for law enforcement to even begin the conversation if they do think that there is an issue with a firearm. So do want to add, we need those laws, but we will always have to be mindful and vigilant of how those laws applied. How are they not simply used as a means to target specifically African American men? That is still something we will always have to be mindful of.
I thank you for sharing that, especially because I've seen a couple of questions here in the chat just about, we see one here from Reverend Wiggins Kennedy, will the red flag laws be equitably applied or more likely to be arbitrarily unequally applied based on race like some other laws? And that is similar to what Dr. Parrish was saying earlier. And so we see that that is a concern. And so just to hear that, yes, this is something we need, but of course, we are going to have to keep a watch on it, or the powers that be, especially because of what it means for the Black community. Let me ask you all this question. We've got viewers on, and we're about at our hour mark here. If I am just, everyday constituent, I'm out here living, maybe I'm a member of a church, maybe, I work at the local pet store, what can I do as a person to take action, right? Because we're here and we're at this point, right, where our emotions are high. We're saying we have to take action. Yet so many people are still missing. We need that information as to what can we do to help take action. What are some tangible pieces that you can give us on this evening?
Well, I'll start out and say, Reverend Franklin put it beautifully at the beginning, is that our church has to be, we as Black people, the church is part of our DNA. It's that one safe refuge. It's the one place to go. So the church has to get involved in this conversation and work with policymakers, work with law enforcement, elected officials locally. We're going to have to demand some things. So when if there is a red flag law that gets passed, and we see in our community that, hey, this has been disproportionately applied, we're going to have to demand action. We're going to have to call for heads to roll in terms of if law enforcement is not doing their job, they need to go. And so we have to change the tone and tenor of our conversations. And they need to be more than conversations. We have to show up. Again, as I said, what the gun manufacturers and the NRA and the local gun folks they're waiting on this to die down before the next legislative session to put a bunch more laws out there that's going to continue to erode this. We have to be that same voice. This has to stop. This stops now. Conversations with your church, your part, National Action Network, NAACP, Divine Nine fraternities and sororities. It's time for us to step up and do our part to make sure that voice, every city council meeting, every county commission meeting where these happen, and at the state level, and not just a form letter, to reach out, to personally touch and conversate with us elected officials to say, this has to stop now. We're not going anywhere.
Thank you, Representative McKenzie.
I think it's a clear indication that we have got to call on every individual in our congregations, just like we call on them to preach and to pray. We got to call on them to participate in the salvation of this country. We've got to call on people to vote. We got to vote. It's got to be a sacred act. It's got the blood of our forefathers and mothers in it, the opportunity to vote. We got to vote. We still have not gotten the level of voting up to the average of the rest of the country in the Black community. We got, let's be serious. We got to participate in the political forum. We got to speak out, but we also got to vote. And I'm so grateful to see these two representatives here, Senator and Representative. We got to participate in the process. We got to run for office. Without them in the chamber, there's nobody to speak in our interests. Nobody to speak from the perspective of what it means to be an African American in this community. And they can't get there unless we vote, unless our churches make it a part of the fabric of how it does ministry. You've got to adopt ministry to the circumstance, the context. And the context in America requires the church to be engaged in the political process so that the equality and quality of life of people can be realized. And there's no other way. You can't talk about heaven. You got to talk about engagement so that the heavenly values apply in the context of our circumstance.
And thank you so much for that reminder. That is definitely what everyone can do is vote, vote, vote. Right here in North Carolina, we have the opportunity to send a Black woman to the U.S. Senate. We currently do not have any now that our Vice President is Kamala Harris. And the reason that it directly relates to this topic, the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate in North Carolina owns a gun store. I remember when he first was elected to Congress, and in North Carolina, sometimes folks squeak through when you have a crowded primary because you only need 30 plus 1. You do not need 50% in North Carolina, you need 30 plus 1. And I distinctly remember, how in the world did this random gun owner get a whole seat to go to U.S. Congress? And he is now running for U.S. Senate. And cannot hold a candle to our other candidate. She was the first Black woman to be Chief Justice of our state Supreme Court. But if you care about this issue, we really need you to vote. If you think that a senator that is a gun owner is going to do anything about gun laws, we know good and well he is not going to do any of that when he gets to D.C. We also have another congressional seat out of Charlotte where one of their opponents is a manufacturer for guns. And I know it's probably wishful thinking, but I'm still thinking through what it means to hold these manufacturers accountable. And where I'm going with that is, if you look at the Fight for 15, we didn't wait for the government to raise the minimum wage to $15. They went to Walmart, they went to Target, they went to all these employers to say, you need to increase these wages. Yeah. And I do think there is something to be said for these actual gun shop owners, for these manufacturers. I think particularly for folks like me, we are in the minority. So our approach is going to have to look different. It's going to have to look different. Years ago, they did start holding Walmart more accountable with the firearms that they were selling. A lot of that, and it's not a new concept. The March for Our Lives, the high school students out of Florida, after that shooting, they took a different approach and went straight to NRA, and they have weakened them. And they will continue to do that. They exposed that they were, quite frankly, very corrupt organizations, still are, where a lot of executives are making a lot of money. People didn't really know where the money was going. So they started having federal charges based on the money, right? So there is more than one way to skin a cat. And I really think we have to get creative with the movement building that we're doing. And in North Carolina, we do have manufacturers here. And, you know, my question to them would be, they may be legal, but why do you need to continue to produce them when every single mass shooting is connected to a AR-15? Explain to me why you're still making them. No matter what's legal, let's at least ask the question. Let's at least take the protest to their doorstep. So that is personally what I'll be working on, is not just, I will continue to hold my officials accountable, but you have to follow the money. And if you go directly to the source, which you know is NRA, which we know is these organizations that support these assault weapons and all these chat groups where they, it's almost like a hobby, you know, and all these candidates, what's really, really horrifying, they will mail postcards with the largest guns that they can find. And we have to fight back against that culture to say that's not okay. And you don't have any right representing anyone. And in closing, our own Lieutenant Governor miles away from where those babies were killed in Texas, he gave a keynote address at the NRA convention. Why is that acceptable?
Yeah.
Why is that acceptable? So we have to really, really continue to push forward on this.
Thank you all. Sorry, Senator. Thank you all. I hear us saying going directly to the source, that we have to vote, right? That is still something that we have to hold at the top. I hear the church demanding action, that it's important for us to show up, not only in our church community, but everywhere, right? We've got the National Action Network, joining the NAACP, right? Using our resources to create a groundswell, really. If you're in a sorority or fraternity, whatever organization that you're in, like, we have to be joining up and starting a movement out here to get this done. The March in Washington is coming up here next month, almost this month. Are there any thoughts about that? Is there any way that we can support? Do you all suggest going? You've given us some very helpful tips here, but I did have a question about the March on Washington and just wanted to lift it all to you.
Absolutely. Please. I think anytime you could bring together, particularly African Americans, with a common theme and a common focus, and have a dialogue and take that dialogue throughout the country, it's worth it. So yes, it is definitely worth descending into DC just to see that power, to see that force. Men and women coming together and saying, we're not just tired of thinking and praying about something, but we're ready to take action now. And we're going to take this march as a galvanizing moment. And we're going to go back home and effect some change. And when next year we come back here, things would have changed. So I encourage people to descend on Washington, D.C.
We can never stop protesting, marching, speaking out, voting. We got to do it all because we got so much at stake. And
That's right.
One of the things that the church ought to own is that what happened 7 years ago in Roots and the 9 killed in Emmanuel A.M.E. church. We couldn't have prayer meeting. We can't get the message that what's happening in the world affects what happens in the church.
Right.
We're in a real darkness. And I hope I can call the churches and leadership to social consciousness. Somehow, too many of our people have not gotten the social justice emphasis of the scriptures.
Absolutely.
That Jesus calls us liberation, set the captives free, to equal the playing ground, equal the ground, the playing field. So we just got to we got the tools, we got the message. We got to apply it, we got to get it out, and we got to use everything that we have to get it out.
And also encourage folks to be a part of the March on Washington, but also would be remiss, again, so many parallels to the civil rights movement, what these children are doing. March for Our Lives, if you are a student in middle school or high school, probably elementary school as well, you can go online and you can organize your own march. And we had them right here in Durham, but they were all over the nation, where you have a walkout and protest, die-ins. We've had students coming to our Capitol here in Raleigh, and they, just, lay it on the ground, to really symbolize the shootings. You see a number of children on the other side of the peaceful protest with the NRA convention, and they are 5 and 6 and 7, and they literally have signs on their chest saying, "Am I next? Am I next?" So the least we could do is step up to this moment, because the children are doing it. They get it. They understand it. They are pushing for this, and they are about to be out of school. I think that you will see this all summer. So I just hope that it is sustained. I hope it's sustained. I hope it's similar to what we saw after George Floyd was murdered. We have to continue to flood the streets. We have to keep this up. We have to apply pressure, because politically, this is it. With the U.S. House that we have and the U.S. Senate we have, we don't know what's going to happen in November. So we have to continue to apply pressure all summer. Also want to lead folks to the website of We Were Orange nationwide on June 3rd through the 5th. folks will be wearing orange and having their own demonstrations. I believe they'll also be in DC the first Saturday of June as well. But you can organize your own movement if you can't make it to DC. But definitely, if you can get to DC, we have to continue to do that to put all that pressure on our U.S. senators as well.
This has been a really rich and dynamic conversation. And so I'm grateful to you all for joining us again on this evening. I hear you all saying that nobody can do every single thing, but everybody can do something. You all giving us a plethora of different options to choose, right? As much as we can do, everybody is able to do something. Before we bring Reverend Sam Brown back on, I would like to, if at all possible, hear just some closing words from our panelists. If there's one thing you want to leave us with today, you may be all talked out, but what is that one thing? And then how can the people get in touch with you? If somebody wants to reach out, what is the best way to contact you? Dr. Richardson, we'll start with you.
Well, I want to thank you for this opportunity to reflect on where we are. I want to thank these political leaders and community leaders, really, who are engaging us and representing us in places of power. And the National NAN, the National Action Network, is available. We are at 126 chapters across the country, and probably in your area there's a chapter. But you can call the national office in New York. You can look it up. I don't have it right with me right now, but the national office in Manhattan, we have a corporate headquarters. We have a lobbying office in DC. So we're available. We're in your community. We're constantly adding chapters to try to build a network to be able to implement. So I want to thank this Star of Zion for this vehicle to communication. Everybody's got to do what they can where they are. I want to thank you, Dr. Allison, for presiding in such a grand way.
Representative McKenzie.
Again, thank you. Thank you for facilitating this conversation. Reverend Brown and I are both alumni of Austin East High School. And just really quick, we had last year, within 5 months, we had 6 students from our alma mater that were active students murdered, killed. And the last one was killed in the building by a member of law enforcement. There's work to do. It broke our hearts, but it also calls us to action. We now have a new police chief that's coming in. There's a new chief of school security that's been there. When we organize, when we fight, we will win. And now is the time to continue the fight. And these 2 people aren't the answer, right? They're 2 leaders at the top. If the tree is rotten, we have to cut it down and plant anew. Whatever it takes. So what I'm asking, what I'm begging, from a public policy standpoint, I'm here, whether you're in Tennessee or not. Sam McKenzie, State Representative, you can call me, 615-741-0678, or you can email me at rep.sam.mckenzie@capitool.tn.gov. I know it's a long title. I'll give that one again, rep.sam.mckenzie@capitool.tn.gov. But reach out to me, propose policy. What can we do, and how can I help you?
Thank you so much. Senator Murdoch.
Yes, just want to thank the A.M.E. Zion Church, again, my church, for hosting this phenomenal discussion. The church has to be a leader in this. We cannot continue to sit back, as we shared, unfortunately. Actually had the opportunity to go to Mother Zion, and you can still feel that spirit in that church where that mass shooting occurred. So it has already come to our churches. It is already happening in our neighborhoods. Now it's plaguing our schools, and it will continue to do so unless we do something about it. And I think oftentimes folks, look back and say, well, what would I have done if I were alive at this time? Or, if I were alive at the time of Dr. King, what would I have done? So I'm asking all of you, what are you going to do? You can't sit this one out. You cannot sit on the sidelines. To have just 2 weekends of to lift up the victims of Buffalo, one of our own, in Zion, couldn't have happened to people that were pure leaders in their community, public, just servants, just wanted to be pillars of their community and just the void that community will feel because they're no longer there. And I just would encourage folks to not turn it off. I think it's very simple for us to view it as yet another shooting because unfortunately there's so many of them, but to think of the fact that an hour before some of those children were killed in Texas, they were holding up their certificates for being placed on A honor roll, B honor roll. Some of them already had dreams of becoming attorneys and accountants and just so young, and their lives were robbed. And let's not let it be for nothing. Let's say that we will get it right this time. We will step up. We won't allow it to be another mass shooting. Let's make sure that this time that we lean in and get something done and continue to hold ourselves accountable, our elected officials accountable. But no matter what it is, just find something to do, find some activity, some way to say enough is enough so that we can take back our communities, take back our streets, and take back our schools.
Thank you to each of you for joining us again on this evening. We really pray your strength and hope to do our part. I know I can speak for me, right? To do my part to uplift what you have going on. But as you carry the mantle of justice, we are with you. I am with you. We're grateful to have you on this evening here representing us, all of us. We're grateful to the communications department and our board of bishops for joining us on this evening as well. Grateful to our managing editor, Reverend Sam Brown, and our chief editor, Mr. Darren Kent. They had this vision and they have executed it at this point in time. It was much needed. At this time, thank you to all of our viewers who are watching on this evening. I'm going to turn this over to Reverend Sam Brown at this time.
Wow. Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Lee, and to all of our guest panelists, Reverend Dr. Richardson, Senator Murdoch, and to my own state representative, Representative Sam McKenzie. Thank you all for the wealth of knowledge and information you shared tonight. And thank you to you, our viewers, in Zion and from all over the world who are tuning in and have tuned in tonight. We pray that you have been blessed by this presentation. Once again, this was our first episode in our new series of Freedom in Crisis. If you have any ideas, any stories that need to be shared, any voices that need to be amplified, any examples of freedom in crisis in your community, within your sphere, please do not hesitate to reach out to us here at the Star of Zion, because we want to shed light on that situation. We are guided by our three pillars here of faith, truth, and love. And we seek to bring you news that is relevant, reliable, and excellent. We also would like for you all to please keep in your earnest prayers the family of the late Bishop Mildred Bonnie Hines, the 98th Bishop in succession of the A.M.E. Zion Church, and presiding prelate of the South Atlantic Episcopal District. Her services you can view this coming Tuesday live here at the Star of Zion beginning at 8 a.m. Again, this is the viewing beginning at 8 a.m. with the services beginning at 10 a.m. This is the final service of triumph, celebrating the life, the legacy of the 98th Bishop in succession, Bishop Mildred Bonnie Hines, the first woman elected to the office of Bishop in the A.M.E. Zion Church. Also, this coming Thursday, When Freedom Speaks, we'll be hosting our show Memories Matter, connecting with care to reveal the answers to Alzheimer's. If you have someone in your family who is experienced or impacted by this condition, we have some information to share with you that we hope will help to enhance your life. Huge thank you again to our Chief Communications Officer, Mr. Darren Kent, and Editor-in-Chief of the Star of Zion. Please go and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook. And Please subscribe to the Star of Zion newspaper, either digitally for a mere $38 a year. We're so happy that you were able to join us tonight, and look forward to more presentations like this right here at the Star of Zion. Thank you and have a blessed evening. And we will leave you with a final video that we hope will move you to action. Please stay tuned.
You're holding a picture of your daughter. She had just won an honor roll.
Yeah.
What do you want people to know about her?
That she was just trying to do the right thing. She was just trying to call the cops. That's what, she was so scared of just strangers and things like this. Like, she would lock the door when I would step out to put gas in the car. Like, this is literally like her worst fear, and she was just trying to help everyone.
She talked about something like this.
So I'm a med aide. So when I arrived on the scene, they saw kids inside. They started bringing the kids out, and I was aiding assistance. One little girl was just covered in blood, head to toe. Like, I thought she was injured. I asked her what was wrong, and she said she's okay. She was hysterical, saying that they shot her best friend, that they killed her best friend, and she's not breathing, and that she was trying to call the cops. And I asked the little girl the name, and she told me, she said A.M.E.
That's how you learned.
She was so sweet, Mr. Cooper. She was the sweetest little girl who did nothing wrong. She listened to her mom and dad. She always brushed her teeth. She was creative. She made things for us. She never got in trouble in school. Like, I just want to know what she did to be a victim.
And she loved being a big sister. You have a 3-year-old son named Zane.
We have a 3-year-old son named Zane who asks for his sister every morning when he wakes up.
He doesn't know at this point, I assume.
We've informed him that his sister is now with the God, and that she will no longer be with us. And of course, he just cried. I mean, he's 3 years old, and it's still just emotional for him to even process. She just turned 10. Her birthday was on the 10th, May the 10th, 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. You had a party for her.
We just gathered a family and had a dinner. She just got her phone. She had been wanting her phone for so long, and we finally got it for her. She just tried to call the police.
She actually tried to call.
Yes, I got confirmation from 2 of the students in her classroom that she was just trying to call the authorities. And I guess he just shot her. How you look at this girl and shoot her? Oh, my baby. How do you shoot my baby? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, of course. How was your wife?
I just want to ask everybody to just keep my wife in their prayers. A.M.E. had the best mother. She did everything she could for her daughter, and she's just beating herself up so bad about this. And maybe it's not your fault, I promise. She just wants you to be happy.
Is there anything else you want people to know about A.M.E.?
I just want people to know that she just died trying to save her classmate. She just wanted to save everyone.
I'm so sorry for your loss. I wish you peace in the days ahead.
Thank you, Mr.
Angel, thank you.